And now today we have Professor R. Indira with us, going to speak on my tryst with academic writing and publishing. So as the title, says, it is going to be a kind of autobiographical, narrative, a discourse on this business, academic business of writing and publishing. See, we have a stream, a school, a kind of methodology that is now, is emerging and is very popular, is autoethnography, ethnographic, narrations, and a method employed in understanding, in studying a particular social phenomenon, wherein the researcher applies, one's own life experience to, he or she tries to integrate his or her life experiences into the study. In the same fashion, Professor Indira is now, I'm sure, will try to, bring in her own experiences in this whole enterprise of academic writing and publishing. So in that sense, it's an autoethnographic narration, autoethnographic narrative or discourse on the subject. Am I not audible? Am I not audible? Can you hear me? Andrew? What happened? Hello? I suppose I was audible. I understand that there was some audio issues. Am I audible now?
Yes. Now you are audible, but your internet connection is not stable.
Okay. I don't know. But now, okay then. So what I was trying to tell you was that that this session is going to be a kind of autoethnographic narration on the topic, my tryst with academic writing and publishing, by Professor R. Indira, who was the immediate past president of Indian Sociological Society, and she was formerly professor and head of the Department of Sociology, University of Mysore. A very accomplished, a seasoned academician and researcher. Now I welcome Professor Sandhya R.S., our own faculty of Department of Sociology, to chair the session and see to its effective conduct of the session. Professor Sandhya is a senior academician. She was working in Mahatma Gandhi University and recently joined our department to our happiness and joy. She has specialized in gerontology, study of old age people, and currently she has more than one research in this area. She has also done number of publications in this particular field, has brought out books, and so a very active academician to that level. Professor Dr. Sandhya, please, take forward the proceedings of the day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anjali sir. A warm good morning to all and all. Respected Dr. Anthony Palakil, Head of the Department of Sociology and also the Organizing Secretary of this webinar. Our Chief Guest of today's session, Professor R. Indira, dear colleagues, faculty members in and outside Kerala, research scholars and dear friends. International webinar on the art of academic writing and publishing in social research is organized by Department of Sociology in collaboration with IQAC and Researchers Union, University of Kerala. It is a great honor for me to introduce and welcome our chief guest, Professor R. Indira, a renowned Indian sociologist. Professor R. Indira was formerly professor and chairperson of the Department of Sociology at the University of Mysore and immediate past president of Indian Sociological Society. During her 42 years of service at the University of Mysore, she has held such positions as Director of International Center, Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Honorary Director of the Center for Women's Studies, and member of many other university committees and bodies. She is Institute of Social Central University, Gulbarga, Chairman of the Institutional Review Board of the Research Wing of Asha Capital and of Public He has put in different capacities in several NASPEAR teams and as UGC nominee on advisory boards of available on YouTube mainly for students and interested public. Professor R. Indira has worked as lead researcher in many national and international research projects having a strong focus on gender issues. She has been a recipient of 2 Fulbright scholarships from the United States Indian Education Foundation, namely Fulbright Postdoctoral Fellowship at Purdue University, Indiana, and Fulbright Visiting Lecturer Fellowship involving teaching assignments at the University of Iowa, USA, 4 fellowships from the Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute, and senior fellowship from the Indian Council of Social Science Research, New Delhi. She has been a visiting faculty of many countries, including US and Canada. Dr. Indira has authored several books and articles in journals, edited volumes and newspapers both in English and Kannada, and has been a contributor and editor to subject encyclopedias, dictionaries, journals, theme-based books and translation projects, and has been conferred literary awards and recognition for her work on social issues. These include the Triveni Award, Sadhurita Award, and H.S. Parvati Endowment Award. She is the president of Samriddhi Foundation, an organization working for building capacities of women, young academics, and forest-dependent communities. Her fortnightly columns published in the leading Kannada daily, Prajavani, brought to the public domain many issues of sociological significance and continue to be cited in many works on related themes. She has lectured across the country in universities, colleges, research institutions, and civil society groups. Dr. Indira has recently completed the work on the English-Kannada glossary in sociology being published by the National Translation Mission at Edinburgh and is currently leading a team translating Anthony Gibbon's sociology into Kannada. She is also editing an English-Kannada glossary in gender studies, which would be published soon. And on behalf of the Department of Sociology, IQAC, and Researchers Union, I welcome Professor R. Indira to deliver the topic on my trip with academic writing and publishing and overview. Thank you. Please, ma'am.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Is the audio and...
Very well.
Yeah,
We can hear.
Okay. So shall I start now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning to all. Professor Anthony Pallakal, Professor Sandhya, my senior colleagues in the department, student friends, thank you very much for this opportunity. I want to say that 2 years ago, when I was president of Indian Sociological Society, in one of the meetings we had, we talked about the need for organizing academic writing workshops because we felt that, writing, as I have noted in my short synoptic note, is one of the weakest links in the research process in this country. And the Indian Sociological Society came forward to invite departments to propose hosting academic writing workshops. And I'm very happy to share with you that the Department of Sociology at the University of Kerala, under the guidance of Dr. Anthony Palakal, was the first one to come forward to do it. And I have very fond memories of the very meticulous and systematic way in which this workshop was organized last year, because I was there for the valedictory program of this workshop last year. And I immensely enjoyed being part of this thoroughly professional academic enterprise. And I'm glad that you are doing this again. And I really look forward to a very interesting deliberations with you all. So thank you again. And let me tell you that this is what I was telling Dr. Anthony in the morning. I would like to today speak from my experience. I heard, it was possible for me to listen to a couple of other lectures. And I don't claim that everything that I say is new. And Dr. Palakal just now noted, the rise of this autoethnographic model in research studies as well as writing. And I'm a great believer in narratives in done. So I will speak from my personal experience of writing, and as a teacher for more than 4 decades at the University of Mysore, I have seen, many changes happening in the entire research process. And I hope you will not only hope that the younger audience in this group will understand what I'm trying to say. So let me first begin by saying, what is this academic writing? Well, I believe that research writing or academic writing, whatever you want to call it, it's not one homogeneous category of writings that you have to create, because writing is done for different purposes. Now, when the moment you use the word academic writing, the impression that goes out is that this writing has to be written in a particular style, in a particular language mode, and also its content is expected to be very classy, theoretical. Yesterday, I was listening to this discussion, and there were questions being asked, I think, by some participants about the need to bring in theory, put your findings in a theoretical framework, etc. So when you talk of writing, I must tell you that the straight first point that I would like to make is that while there is no compromise on quality, while there is no compromise on language, while there is no compromise on content, I don't think we should suffer from a massive complex that many people are made to suffer from when you say it has to be like this only. I'm sorry to say this, but in certain circles, people will find that if you use very simple language, if everybody understands you, if you're not using jargons and complicated words, then you are not a good writer. Now, I would like to say that's totally a misconception. We need not feel bad that we are not using a particular type of language. In fact, one of the first lessons that I learned from my teacher 35 years ago when I started writing was, Professor Parvatama, I'm her student. So she called me and said, I want to warn you, don't use flowery language. And my mentor, who taught me all this, said, don't get caught in your own sentences. Because I remember, when I was a youngster and had just started doing research, there was a professor, with all great due respects, because he was a great scholar. But, he would write one sentence in one paragraph, and I used to meet his students who used to come and tell me, our teacher, he just writes one sentence in one paragraph. Often we don't understand. It was all very classy, I agree. So I think when you talk of writing, we must be very clear in our mind and answer two questions first. What am I writing? And for whom am I writing? Academic writing simply does not mean you address a particular type of audience only. Writing research writing has different purposes, and your audience is different. And today, we are more conscious of what we call the need for sociology to be a public sociology. I know very well that there was a time when it was thought that serious sociologists or serious social scientists do not write for newspapers. I even remember, many of us being told, don't indulge in journalistic writing. That word they used to use. You're not a journalist, so don't do journalistic writing. But the whole picture has changed today. I'll be very frank with you. Today, sociologists and the sociological community enjoys being in the media. And there is absolutely nothing wrong about it, because, why are we doing so much work? Who is the person, who are the people who are supposed to receive that work? See, I learned a lot of my own participatory research methodologies from my colleague in the University of Calgary in Canada, with whom I did a lot of work with indigenous communities in Canada and forest dependent communities way back in Uttara Kannada district of Karnataka. We worked on 4 projects together, supported by the Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute. So he was working in this community in a place called Hare River in Canada. And I was working with a group called the Kunbi in Uttara Kannada district. When we initially started our research, we used to have lots of arguments, because he used to tell me that the data that is generated, that the writing finally that comes out of our research must be owned by the community. I'll be honest with you, for me, as we are not used to those concepts, I was quite shocked. I used to tell him, what do you mean by ownership of the data and the information by the community? He had already done by then great work in the Canadian Arctic with indigenous communities. And, the books that he wrote, the publications based on that research that was done there, very clearly mentioned that the ownership of that data, the ownership of the information is with the community with whom they have worked. So this was an eye-opener for me, because often we don't like to admit it, but the truth remains that we take the people for granted. We treat them as if they are our subjects. They give us the information and we don't go back to them. So when we decided to start our projects, we decided that we will first go to the people. Some people might say, oh, this is very difficult. It's not easy to know. Nothing is a problem with this. So when we went to the people and asked them Many people, many researchers in social sciences and sociology in particular, don't do this. We decide what we want to study. How often have we asked the people with whom we want to work whether they want this research, whether they have perceptions that could be built into this research, and whether, you know, our work ultimately goes back to them and will be of some use. It's one thing that most people in the academic community think of scores, think of job related requirements, etc. There's nothing wrong in trying to be academically active and alive and writing and reading and doing research. But ultimately, we also have to think of the outcome of this research. Is it going to the people for whom it is meant? Are they reading? Initially, when I started work with the forest communities, I met with a lot of hostility, you know, because those people were not happy. We were looking at the women's participation in, you know, this program called the Joint Forest Planning and Management Program. And the community with which I worked, the word gender just did not exist there. They were shocked. They were angry with me. I almost got beaten up because they said, well, women, what are you going to work with women? We don't allow our women to talk to strangers. What do they know? If you want, you talk to us. Then over a period of time, you know, because I learned that one of the reasons for this kind of resistance was that people who had gone there earlier couple of times never went back. They didn't know what happened to the information that they gave. And of course, you know, this is really a very dense, beautiful forest, but with absolutely no exposure. They had no knowledge of what was going on in the world, what was being done with their data, etc. So when our work took on, and when people realized that we were not there only as information seekers, but we were using the participatory methodology, then my colleague, you know, Karim told me, let's do this. So the first thing we did, I'm sharing this with you, whenever we started our work, we always made it a point to invite people from different walks of life. I'm not saying that I'm the only one who has done it. People have done this and are still doing it. And ask them, you see, this is a project that we have got. We want to work with you. What is it that you expect from us? We seek your cooperation, but also let's know if there is something that you want us to do. Now, talking about writing, I want to tell you that in one such meeting, you know, when we got a project to work on the role of civil society institutions in infrastructure building, in development programs in that region, one person in the audience, you see, he was a school teacher. He said, okay, you're asking me what we expect from you. Can I tell you? We said, please, that's what we want you to do. Tell us. You know, he said, if it is possible for you, see how people think. If it is possible for you, if you have the resources, he said this in our language, but I'm saying it in English because I want you to, all of you to please understand. He said, can you create an infrastructure profile of this region, bring out a publication and share it with the communities here? This request came as a surprise to me and to my colleagues. He said, why? Why do you want this? So he said, look, there are 456 villages. You know, you can more or call many of them just human habitations. Very small villages, remote villages, completely cut off from any kind of connection, etc. Then you see, he said, we do not know what we have and what we don't have. This is a primary school teacher speaking. So he said, if you can tell us, take each village. If you can do that, he said, we will support you. If you can do that, please create a map, a profile map for every human habitation in this region. Bring it out in the form of a publication. Share it with different stakeholders in this area so that, you know, knowledge becomes power. Now I'm coming to this point. So what we did was, with the participation of the people, we created 50 questions. You may ask, this work can be done by anybody. It was not just demographic data. It had about 40 to 50 questions. Afterwards, we edited, we discussed with the people. We said, where is the village, primary school, different levels of schooling, whether it's which is the nearest bus stop, all those things. You know, you can say, why do you need a sociologist to do this? Anybody can do, anybody cannot do. Because I believe that sociology is meant to ask questions. You can bring your insights. Sociological knowledge, sociological research, sociological understanding, these are things that have taught us to critically look at information, to critically look at the social environment that surrounds us. So when we were able to prepare that infrastructure profile, we brought it out in Kannada, and English is available, of course, in the soft form. And when the book got published, you know, and we shared it with all villages, with all the state departments in the area, with the government offices in Bangalore, all related government offices, media, and many people were shocked to know, well, is this the kind of situation that prevails there? And I'm also very happy to share with you that because of this information we were able to give, today, you know, 10 years, 15 years down the line, you will see that pre-metric hostels, post-metric hostels have been established in some parts of the district. That region, that taluka in Karnataka is the largest in our state. But even today, there are millions of people who have not even heard of its name simply because it was invisible. Now, why am I telling you all this? Because we are talking about writing. And I began by saying that all writing does not serve the same purpose. It's very important to reach out to people. And I'm very happy that even today, this book that we were able to bring out, this writing, I will call it, was instrumental for bringing some kind of change initiatives in the region. So when you are doing writing, you also have to be very clear in your mind about the purpose. So let us not feel bad that we haven't, you know, written in a particular format. We have not written in a particular style of language. But when you write research, when, you know, the findings of your research are made available, who are the users? And, you know, to quickly go back to what I said, there was a time, I know myself, 25 years ago, I would say, or 20 years ago, when it was thought that serious academics don't write in the media. They think that, you know, it was one level less. No longer that feeling today. Because if you don't, as a sociologist, let your voices be heard, if you are not raising critical questions on development, on whatever is happening around you, then who else do you think should do that? Often, you know, there is a line that divides our discipline from those of others. Some people say, you know, as a sociologist, my job is to simply speak, theorize, write. I'm not a social worker. Well, I have always believed that social work is not a matter of degree or anything. It's a matter of attitude, the desire to engage yourself, the desire to include yourself in society and make, you know, include society in your understanding, in your writing, in your reading. So all the point that I'm trying to make is that first and foremost, you must be very conscious of the audience that you want to reach when you start, when you plan your writing. And again, as I have made it very clear, there is no compromise on quality, on grammar, on language, and on content. But we have to first take into account the audience. I think there is some disturbance, the audience that you are reaching. That's why I would say not all academic writing or writing for that matter serves the same purpose. Now coming back, I think this point has already been talked about in the earlier lectures, but how important it is for us to be self-critical. See, unfortunately, in a research methodology class, we talk about what is called stages of social research. I have done that as a student. I have also done it as a teacher. I have written, I don't say no. And then you say selection of the problem, review of literature, hypothesis, sampling, data collection. Finally, you come to report writing. And I think that's a grave mistake, because my teachers and mentors told me, do not ever think that writing starts at the end. It starts in the very beginning. It starts in the very beginning. This is a lesson that every teacher of research methodology and every student of methodology has to learn and teach. We wrongly assume that you start writing the report or thesis or whatever paper only at the end. But a good research tradition requires that you start writing. I have written it in my note. You know, my mentor, my teacher, he did his research studies at the University of Edinburgh in Delhi. When I started, in UK, when I started going to him for guidance, one of the first things, he didn't hurt me. I thought that, you know, I speak very well and I write very well. I'll be frank with you, because nobody till then had corrected me. But he said very politely, you know, no, this is not the way you should write. Shall I tell you something? He said, my professor, you know, I accepted, I have written that, the 21st draft of my dissertation. I was shocked to hear this. I said, what? 21st? He said he made me write 20 times. Each time, some improvement was there. When I wrote my first proposal, it was struck down by a senior professor with whom I shared it. I felt like crying. I just shot it down, if I may use that word, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. But I didn't give up. He said, go. My professor used to say, she's a very strict person. He used to just say, you know, my father was a professor of English in the university. They were all colleagues. And the first time I wrote something and took it, you know, then my book went like this, and she said, Shia, you being his daughter, this is the way you write. That again was a shocker for me. I said, I thought that I had written very well. So you see, it's very important to be self-critical. If, you know, you first see what you have written, and you yourself will start feeling bad about what this, and your mind, you know, if you are very serious, sensitive, conscious of creating quality, you will feel bad, you know, you will say, did I do this? Yes, who else will? I only did this. So writing is the most arduous task in research. And it is something you have to keep doing. And writing comes with reading. You know, that's why I said a methodology class which says literature review happens after selection of a problem is wrong according to me. It actually starts even before you choose the problem. And you have to read, reread, and read from other disciplines. This is again something that I learned from my teachers, that your reading is not confined only to your subject, because we don't live in isolated towers. You're talking so much of interdisciplinary research today. So in order to, I always have told my students, you know, both to identify both our strengths and weaknesses. We have to listen to others and we have to read what others have done. Otherwise, no, I think that whatever I have done is the best. And there is a great deal of difference between the way we speak, the conversational kind of talk, and writing. So my own tryst with academic writing or writing has taken me through several stages. For 4.5 years, I wrote a column in a very well-known Kannada newspaper. And for me, this was a very big opportunity to bring sociology into the public domain. And when they started reading it, many people used to call, oh, really? Your subject deals with all this? We didn't know. And yesterday I heard Professor Shruti Tambe talk about this public sociology. I think that as sociologists, as teachers, as students, it's very important for us to take sociology to the public domain. Unfortunately, our discipline and our voices don't have the kind of visibility that we must be having. Because, many of us still live in ivory towers. We live in isolated compartments. That's why I said public sociology today, sharing people's experiences is very important. Why do you think, COVID, for example, about which we are all talking so much, and it has touched our lives in different ways. But generally, it's looked at as a health issue, as a demographic issue, or as an economic issue. But there is a huge sociological analysis that can be done, that needs to be done, that must be done to understand this pandemic, its impact. It is group specific, location specific, caste specific, religion specific, occupation specific. All these dimensions have to be brought in by sociology. So I think that reaching out through your writings, reaching out to people, telling them certain hard truths, raising certain questions that otherwise, don't come up. I remember I was called to, speak and give a small write-up in a medical conference. People say, what? Then when I spoke about, the concept of gaze, medical gaze. When I spoke of the hospital as a total institution, the doctors there were surprised. They said, we did not even know these things. For us, everybody was a patient. We never even thought that there are these angles. And they said, thank you very much for telling us this. We will start looking at our profession differently. And I think that is where writing in sociology has meaning. The main job of writing, my own purpose in writing, whether I write it in Kannada or in English, has been mainly to set people thinking. It's not only for my development. It is not only for making me feel, go from this stratum to another stratum. I'm not at all saying that should not be done, but it's very important to ask the question, how will it affect the people? And fortunately, for the last 20-25 years, our own writings and researchers have been able to bring some kind of change. I don't say everything changed. Just to quickly go back to the region where I was working, this is a very beautiful forest. There were 1 or 2 resorts. Today the homestay resort culture has caught up like anything. And they were all outsiders. So these people, the local people, who are experts in the flora, fauna, biodiversity, travel, walking into the forest, everything, were only serving the people there. They were washing, they were cooking, they were cleaning, but they were not included. So when our work started in that region and we started writing, I started talking about the need for local people to take up this tourism industry into their fold. So I said, you people are not owners. The landowners are either upper caste or upper class, or people from, outside the region, and they are only using you as a service group. Why don't you use your knowledge? Why don't you use your capacities? Why don't you involve men, women, the young to build up this industry? And today I'm very happy to share with you that one of the major things our research writings were able to do was to set up a very, very flourishing, a homestay culture in that area. And the local people are involved, something like, I'm sure in Kerala also we use this. The sweet potato, for example, is a staple food in that region. There are at least 40 to 60 varieties of that sweet potato about which the local people knew nothing. They just thought it's another food stuff, it's another vegetable kind of a stuff that grows in the forest. Today, because of this new consciousness that was created, people are having tuber melas. Recently they had a tuber mela with many institutions from Kerala, from Tamil Nadu, from Karnataka, and from other parts participating. And now they have linked up the local people and the communities with all these institutions. And today there is a lot of money that has come in to this. And so, they are doing very well. Today, women have bank accounts. Women who never even came out of their kitchen for years and decades, bank accounts. And local youth are running homestays. They now come, they take the visiting students, researchers who come there for research, botany, maybe medicinal plants, name anything, it is there. Why I'm sharing with you all this is, it is not just important to write for myself, write for my degree, but whatever we write, we write. I remember a very senior journalist, and I want to share this with you, which is very important. Who once told me, he's now heading a very, very well-known daily in Kannada. He said, when students get their PhD, they'll be very happy about it. And you see the photo, the news item, etc. He said, every day to my office, so many people from your university come with notifications and pictures. I said, okay, we will put this. But I have been asking them, give me a small little note on what research you have done. Let's put that also so that people will know what is going on. This is writing. He said, I'm sorry to tell you that till date, not a single person has written anything. I said, just give me 4 lines, what you have done, where you have worked. It's not just a topic per se. So all I can go on speaking. I hope I just have another 10 minutes and then I'll stop. So what I am trying to say is, when we write, first, there is need to read. Read from other disciplines. Read what others have written. Read what, experts in the field have written. Have the patience to listen. And when I read what others have written, I will know what is it that I should do. And I think in research, I always tell my students, it's also important to know what you should not do. Generally, we think of only what is it that I can do, how should I do it? But it's also important to think, what am I not supposed to do? Unfortunately, today, I've already made it clear to you that I'll speak from my experience. Please don't mistake me, and I'm not personally commenting on anybody. Individuals, persons don't matter anything to me, but I'm only concerned about writing as an issue, publication as an issue. We must read, reread, and reread your writing first. I said already that's writing must be a habit. We are very weak in that. Because our application capacities, are not encouraged to grow. See, you are talking so much of innovation in research, innovation in academics, but where is this innovation going? We write one, most of our students write one exam at the end. And dissertations have been introduced only because we want to get them into the art of writing. But I'm sorry to say this, that a lot of writing, I'm not generalizing anything, let me make it very clear, because a lot of serious work is also going on in many departments, but in many places, this is a joke. Just, change. It's one thing to refer. It is another thing to copy. I heard this being discussed yesterday. It's another thing. Now, coming to publication, I mean, what I'm saying are facts known. Today, there is so much pressure to publish. Yes, we must publish. I agree. It should reach a logical end. I'll be happy, if my work gets recognized. But where and how? Today, publication, unfortunately, has become, what shall I say, business, industry. And who is calling the shots? Where you publish is also very important. Reading good journals is important. And there's been a plethora of online journals, especially today. And I'm very, very, very horrified and angry, I will tell you. I will use this word consciously to say. It was once found in a certain university. I'm not going to take names. It may be happening elsewhere also. That because now there is a condition that you have to publish 2 papers before you submit your thesis in many universities across the country. Many research students themselves became publishers. Some online journal, 2 papers, after that close. Now this is no joke. We are making a mockery of that, a very serious issue, as I call it. And so much is being written today. So much is being produced. I will tell you this. I don't feel bad to say this. I once got a call. I will not take any names. I will not take anything, but I'm just sharing this with agony with you. I once got a call from, a young girl who was a data entry operator in a typing store in my place. You know what she called me for? She said, "Madam," I don't know, she got my number. She said, "Ma'am, I have been given a book by somebody. It was a book on a certain tribe in a certain place, and asked to copy this." She said, "I'm interested in literature. I'm interested in reading." So I couldn't keep quiet. I thought that I must bring this to your notice. Do something. I can't take it, she said. But you see, I am an employee here. I'm a poor person. I have been asked by my boss to do this, but I couldn't control when I saw this because it's being made into a thesis. Now this one has to stop. I did my best, brought it to the notice of the people concerned, constituted committee, all kinds of things happened. Finally, it went through. I agree that we always need that inspiration to study. We need that inspiration to read. Like somebody once told me, "Oh, Marx is nobody's property." I know that. But quote. Take it from any source. It's not just, nowadays many writings, publications have come in for a lot of, what shall I say, issues when they have even gone to the court, which is original and which is copy. Articles are being produced. You only change the place. 2-3 times it has come to me only, I'm telling you openly, to find out which is original. X place becomes Y place and Z place becomes A place. That's all. Nothing else changes. So I want to tell you that whatever we may write, we don't have to make it a production kind of a house, but whatever we write, it may be just one publication a year. Whatever. The purposes are different. We have to get out of this copy-paste culture when we publish. Make mistakes, it's okay. You learn by making mistakes. And you always will find, I want to say before I close, that your second draft will always be better than the first. At least some change will be there. So writing, you know, as I've said, I'll just summarize and close it. Writing, as I have said, repeated it, is not meant to be started at the end. It is something that needs to be done right from the beginning. And first think of who your audience are. Don't, as I have said again, and I repeat this, do not feel bad if you have used simple language. I'm so consciously making this statement. The quality doesn't lie. When somebody says, you know, look at the kind of language he or she is using, I didn't understand anything. That is not what you are meant to do as a teacher, as a researcher. You have to have your people understand what you're talking. So simple language, short sentences, not going around and around and around and using big words. That itself is not academic writing. Second thing is publish, but be very focused, you know, as to where you want to publish. You have in each subject journals, everybody may not be able to go that far. Peer review, you know, is very important. People get angry when they send their you know, writings, and some people review, and when they get the review, you know, and some people refuse to believe that they can be corrected. So we must first get out of all these jargons, listen, talk, learn, and more important thing is to unlearn. So thank you very much. I've just shared some of my thoughts with you because I like always to speak, you know, and talk, because I think narratives, talking is a very important technique that often we have forgotten to use. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I want to congratulate the Department of Sociology for doing this, because this is a very, very critical area. And I'm also very glad that so much interest is being taken in this. Thank you. Over to you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Indira ma'am, for your interesting and informative talk. Really, the session is quite refreshing, and how one can make writing better is really a thought-provoking one. And also, you opine that academic writing cannot be homogeneous in nature. Both our work and writing must have relevance in the public domain and try to touch people's lives. Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your valuable experience. Now the session is open for discussion. And dear friends, if you have any questions, you please unmute your mic and ask directly to Indira ma'am. Please. Anybody, please?
Hello.
Hello, ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ma'am, this is Indra Priyadashini here.
Yeah, please tell.
I'd like to have a query or a clarity, ma'am. Like, I have come across this statement that when you explain about women in the dense forest,
Okay.
same kind of situation also encountered, women do not know their rights, and they are actually under hegemony, and they are happy in the situation what they are. So researchers or like learned professionals go to the women and expose or reveal their rights in the society. Then the women come to know about their rights. Then when they claim for the rights, there arises the problem, because they have to fight with the other community for their own rights. So heard from men saying that when women are actually happy in the hegemony, why do you people come and make them disturb and make them aware of their rights and put them in trouble? Let them be in their own situation. What's your problem in doing all those things? So I can't able to manage those men also. At the same time, women also come up with the same claim. I'm happy with the situation. Why do you people come and disturb us? So what can I do? Like, what's your view on it, or how can I manage this as a researcher?
Okay, thanks for asking a very, very important question. It's not that we have not faced it. I remember once a very, good friend of ours picking up a fight with me and telling me, my mother is so happy taking care of all of us. She's been doing this for years in her life. Why do you people come and disturb us? Why do you come and spoil tranquility? But I'm very clear on this. You see, there is always a line that you draw between personal, so-called personal happiness and social good. When you find that something is, because ultimately I think as researchers, as students of sociology or students, basically as those who got access to knowledge, it is also our bounden duty. Oh, you may speak to one person, though we don't imagine that we change the whole world. However, it is very important for us to point out that something is wrong. Socially, it's not good when we see that. Because a lot of research, yes, I agree with you that, a lot of research that we do is very descriptive. We have talked so much about violence, we have talked so much about inequality, we have talked so much about everything. But the real good research is one which raises 2-3 typically, critical questions and comes out with answers. People will say, yes, because I have been in the women's movement and came into women's studies academia from the movement. So I know what you're talking about. They say, these people, they come and they disturb us. They come and, put ideas into the minds of our sisters, our wives, our mother, etc., etc. But no, I think that research ultimately must put ideas. It doesn't matter what the response is. But my own experience has taught me, and women also, you see, they have they've not had exposure, and they haven't even thought about it. See, housework, for example, unless you talk to people, unless you convince them, take examples from their own lives, show how, by them being vocal, by them asking questions, by them refusing to do certain things, or, adamantly saying, yes, I'll do this because it's important for me. You will never let women that we are talking about, know what is freedom of choice. So I think that in research, in writing, it is very important to raise questions and attack. Whatever language you may use, of course, you need to use language. Many times you have to be quite open and vocal about it. People may say, look at the way she or he talks. But then it is important, because we cannot forget that it is only that kind of writing, it is only that kind of creative thinking which has brought all of us this far. So we don't need to make any compromise, because, I'll tell you one thing, always in life, the path of compromise is very easy. And unfortunately, many people are doing that in research also. But the path of conflict is always strewn with hurdles. So you choose that path of conflict As a researcher, if you find that something is not right, right not in a personal context, but right for society, for social good, for social justice, always point out. This is what we should do, and this is has been always my conviction, and that's what I do when I write.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your insight.
Ma'am, one question from Sam Nesamani. Dear ma'am, what do you think about the mushrooming dubious journals prescribed by UGC?
But sorry, what do you think of the?
What do you think about the mushrooming dubious journals prescribed by UGC? Not reliable journals, it was prescribed by UGC.
Well, I think the question itself has, you see the dubious journals approved by UGC?
Yeah, prescribed by UGC. Prescribed by UGC.
Prescribed.
Yeah.
Well, all I want to say is that today publication is a huge, big racket in this country. I'll be open about this. It's a racket. And, you know, it is power to some people, to some houses. I was also quite surprised that some names have got in and others have not got in there. So I think that today publication has basically become the power of lobbying, the power of, making people in positions of power accept. You go to many college libraries, you see some 30 copies of a book by people whom you have not even heard of, because today there is a huge group of what they call as ghost writers. But many of these, you know, I'm not generalizing, I made it very clear, but there are many publishing houses where which have employed the services of these ghost writers. They prepare books by dime a dozen, journals by dime a dozen, and then get it across. I think that the academic community here in India, barring a few exceptions, is not vocal to get its voices across to the places and people who are supposedly going to matter in this country. This is my opinion.
Hello, good morning, Dr. Indira.
Good morning.
This is Roy PK. I was your student, ma'am.
Okay.
In fact, I am so happy and excited to see you.
Okay,
and when I got the browser for this webinar, I saw your name. You are my HOD. I was in the 1995-97 batch.
In Mysore?
Mysore, yes, ma'am. Mysore.
Now,
you are educational sociology, and I am so happy to see you.
Thank you.
It is indeed, I consider it a blessing, in fact, to listen to you this time. So
Thank
happy.
you very much. It is very nice seeing you. May I know where you are now?
I am in Bangalore, ma'am. I am in Bangalore. I am heading a college.
Okay.
I'm a principal of a college now. Also, I am pursuing my PhD in sociology.
I see.
From CMR University.
Pardon?
From CMR University.
Oh, CMR. Yeah, I know.
So it's a part-time PhD I am pursuing now. After my MA, I could not continue there. I remember you were asking me to continue. In fact, you were very inspirational, and you are actually my motivation. Because I am no problem in acknowledging it publicly, because you have inspired me, and I could be the topper there in the department at that time, but I could not continue my PhD.
Oh, yeah. Now I remember.
Yes. You remember me.
Yes.
So let me, without wasting time, let me come to the question, ma'am. Can you suggest a few journals that are approved by UGC in the care list? Because I was searching in the web, and it is very confusing to see the recognized, care listed journals in psychology domain. Can you suggest a few good journals where we can publish our articles?
Sociology.
Yes.
What
Sociology.
Bulletin? Sociological bulletin?
Yes. Bulletin or journals.
Contributions to Indian sociology?
Yes, where we can publish. I would like to get a few journals in the UGC care listed list where we can publish our articles.
Okay.
Journals.
To be very honest with you, I don't at this point of time remember all the names. But to the extent possible, I will tell you. See, publication is also, publishing in a good journal is also a big challenge, because it's a long process. often the realities are different from the, what you call as the ideal. You know, the reality is that you are, especially when you are doing research, you are under a certain time-bound program kind of a thing to publish in a certain journal your article before you submit your thesis, etc. But to the extent possible, you know, I would suggest like this. These are the very good standard journals, but even to and get a consideration to be published there, it will take sometimes 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or may or happen or may not happen. But I would only suggest that even among the online journals that are there, I would say that this is only my suggestion, that you go to the website of the journal, okay,
Okay.
and see who the people who are involved with that journal are.
Okay. Okay.
Then, you know, you will get an idea of you know, the seriousness with which that journal may be under publication. And I always look for this, you know, whenever it's an institution or writing, I would always look for names. I'm not saying that I'm going to sit in judgment. I have still a long way to go, and I've never believed that I'm the ultimate. But still, you know, you will know who a serious researcher is. Because in every discipline, there are some names. And we must keep on adding to those names, because the younger generation must get in, and that list should be, everybody cannot be this only. So I would suggest look for those names, look for the work that they have done, because now that internet is so active, this is something that you can do. And when you know that, you know, they have a credibility in that area, in the discipline, then I think you can consider that for publication.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, because we know these days there are a lot of fake journals.
Definitely.
In the
I am seeing, no, they are created for the sake of publishing 2 articles, and then you look for that, it's not there.
Okay. 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 Thank you so much.
You know, sorry to say this, there is another big discussion in the academic world about what is important for teaching.
Okay. Okay.
Your performance, your capacity is judged on the basis of your publication. But how often do people find out whether you are a good teacher, you are doing your teaching job properly, because you are a teacher first? But publication is important. I don't deny that. But this is what you should do. Look for the work that people who are controlling that journal, who are in the editorial board, advisory board, you know, what they are doing. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to contact Anthony Parakal and get your email ID so that I can get in touch with you. Maybe I'll go try to organize this.
It's just ramaravindira@gmail.com. That's all.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for nice seeing you.
Number also from Dr. Palakal. I have no problem. Give me a call.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, ma'am. There is a question from Shivani Kumari, and she is doing a sociological study of migration. I am a little bit confused. Shall I add theoretical perspective in it or not? If I add, what should I add it? Theoretical perspective or sociological thinker?
So I understood the first part. Sorry, will you kindly repeat? Study on migration, right? That's what you said.
Yeah. She's doing sociological study of migration. I am little bit confused. Shall I add theoretical perspective in it or not? If I add, what should I add it? Theoretical perspective or sociological thinker?
Well, I think migration is itself an area in sociology which has been analyzed, discussed, and written about. So, and again, you know, I don't think migrants are again a homogeneous category. So, first and foremost, it depends on who your study group is. And depending on that, there is absolutely nothing wrong in adding a theoretical framework because you do not necessarily use theory to only prove what you are saying, because always new theories must come. You can use theories even to critique those theories, if you think that things have changed now. You can use theory for inspiration, you can use theory for critiquing, you can also use theory to just substantiate what you are saying. And so there is plenty written on migration in sociology itself, and so I think, yeah, using them is fine. But my only suggestion is that you take it forward from there, your own work. You show how different it is. See, unfortunately, in writing, what we do, and I've seen this in PhD thesis and dissertations, we always have a big chapter called Review of Related Literature. But I'm subject to correction if I'm wrong, but in majority of those reviews, it's like so and so has worked on this. This is what he says, or this is what she says. But very rarely we say how different my own work is from the work already done, or make a review of all those studies, which will say, see, these are the main points emerging. I think in research writing now, it is very important for us to make it mandatory to include at the end of the review of literature chapter, if we have one in our thesis, a gist of what all these studies have done, and go on to say how my own work is different, or is it simply repeating what this has been done. See, in social science, we have one very convenient argument. When somebody says, what is so new in what you're doing, this is already done anyway, immediately we say, okay, that was in Mysore and this is in Bangalore, or that was in Kerala, this is in Bihar, or in Mysore itself we say, oh, that area is different from my area, so why are you saying that I'm copying, I'm repeating? So this kind of arguments, I mean, I know there are regional variations, but I think using theory is fine to learn as well as to unlearn. That's all I will say. I hope I have answered your question.
Okay, ma'am. Another question is about, please provide insight on how should one proceed to get a piece of work published. Should one write and post? Is it that simple?
Should one? Sorry?
Please provide insights on how should one proceed to get a piece of work published. Should one write and post? Is it that simple?
No, I'll tell you, nothing is simple. But it's in our hands to make the process simple. First is, let me be very honest, at the cost of sounding a little bit harsh, I would like to say, I'm not talking about you, but general, how many people in any discipline for that matter today are completely aware of the list of journals, the list of books, etc., that one has to compulsorily read? Number one. Number two, if you have to publish something, you have to be very focused. You first decide where you want your paper to go. Of course, yes, I would like it to go in the best ever journal with that much of whatever points, rankings, etc., which is not possible for every one of us. However, as I told you earlier, look for those journals that have credibility in your discipline and aim on publishing there. Read a couple of copies of that journal. Also read those journals or books in your own discipline which are considered standard, and then work your paper on those lines. That's what you should do. Any other question?
One of the questions is about how to get motivated during research writing, and is hypothetical issue in research writing acceptable?
Hypothetical.
Yeah.
Well, you see, my view on a hypothesis is very clear. you know, in many research studies, they insist that there should be a hypothesis. Personally, I don't think so. The research tradition from which I have come never made it compulsory for us to have a hypothesis. But however, you know, I would prefer to say a researcher must use, you know, what C. Wright Mills calls sociological imagination. Hypothesis or hypothesizing it's not a problem. You definitely can do it, provided you know you have data to subject that hypothesis to empirical verification. But it's definitely very important for a researcher to apply, you know, his or her imagination to a particular area which he or she wants to study. So there's nothing wrong in really hypothesizing, but I don't think that you must have a hypothesis to take your work forward. Often we go into areas which are completely new to us and unexplored. So where, you know, when you start doing research in these unexplored, totally new fields, it's not easy to have a hypothesis and not necessary also. But nowadays, you know, with research becoming more and more corporatized, with research becoming more and more so-called professional, they are insisting on hypothesis and will reject many proposals if they don't have hypothesis. So it depends on the purpose for which you are writing your proposal or your work.
One more question, ma'am.
Yeah.
Would you please comment on ethics of writing?
Sorry?
Especially when we are trying to capture the subjective experience of marginalized communities.
It's not clear, you know, it's breaking, audio is breaking.
Okay.
Audio.
Okay, ma'am. Would you please comment on ethics of writing, especially when we are trying to capture the subjective experience of marginalized communities?
Okay, yeah. See, when we are talking, you know, this is again, there are two schools of thought in sociology and in writing itself. One group believes that unless you have personally experienced marginalization, you know, you are really not capable of bringing out the lived experiences of the marginalized. Well, the other group says, okay, you may not have personally experienced marginalization. However, as a student, as a researcher, as a teacher, as a human being, you can always, you know, feel that, feel the pangs that marginalized groups experience. But the one thing that you have to avoid, the ethical question here, I think is that we need not use any patronizing kind of language. The very important thing in portraying the experience, the experiences of the marginalized, whatever the nature of marginalization may be, is to write the reality in a language that simply conveys experience. Because as a sociological student of sociology, I think that it is very important for us. In fact, we have a bounden duty to write what is actually going on, because often we get scared of speaking the truth. We go beating around the bush and don't say what we want to say clearly. But especially in talking about marginalized, the ethics that I think is to be adopted is to speak of the lived experiences, the harsh realities that characterize their lives. This is my belief, and that's what I have done to the extent possible.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Another question that came up, you know, on the screen about migration. It went off very fast.
No, ma'am, that is already right writing.
Sorry? Oh, it's already answered?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Another question is, how should we approach research related to environment?
How? First is we have to have a clear conception of what is empowerment. See, unfortunately, what happens is in many researchers, there is neither conceptual clarity nor is there a definite focus. So empowerment, for example, is, it's a concept. It's not
Ma'am, excuse me, ma'am.
practice.
Excuse
So
me, ma'am.
you have to, yes?
Ma'am, it is not about empowerment, environment.
Sorry?
Environment.
Okay, sorry. I heard it as empowerment. Environment, is again a multi-dimensional issue. It's the environment simply, and everybody knows this, I don't have to say this. Environment is not just about the physical surroundings. The environment has different meanings for different people in different contexts. So when you say doing environmental research or research on environment, we have to first define the concept, understand and present in a very focused manner what I mean by environment. What is the environment that I am talking about in my study? Is it the social environment, the physical environment, the environment in various forms that surrounds us? So when you say environment, it is too simplistic a term or a very general term. So environment, take it further and explain what is it that you have in mind when you say you want to study environment. What are its components? Physical, social, psychological, cultural? You can name any number of them. And then go ahead and try to see in research. It is very important to narrow down. One lesson that my teacher, my mentor taught me was that don't try to do too many things in one go. Try to narrow down and try to compare. This is very important. Giving a comparative perspective, it is very important. That is why, I remember my faculty affiliate in US, when I went first time, told me, it's good that you are studying about women, but also please find out how different the situations of men are. Don't imagine that everything for men is perfect and fine. There are also possibilities that they may be having the same issues or problems of a different nature. So when you talk of environment, when you talk of marginalization, whatever your topic may be, always try to narrow down, ask 2-3 questions. In environment, for example, especially I would say, rather than talking about it in general broad terms, it is very important to narrow down the focus, ask 3-4 critical questions and try and find answers. That is what I would do. Okay, thank you.
Hello, ma'am. This is Indra again.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I would like to have a clarity in one of my another doubt also.
Yeah.
The use of jargon words like complex words. I would like to know new words in English. Like I would like to improve my English proficiency.
Yeah.
So would it be a mistake if I use those kind of new words which I learn when I include in my writing also? Because I have come across that like simple words will be well enough to understand. When you use complex words, the readers may find it difficult to find the meaning of all those things. So is it a mistake to use those kind of a new complex words inside the research writing? Because it can be obviously explained in the simple words also. But is it a mistake to use those kind of complex words?
Yeah, I get it. I know what you're saying. See, I think one of the points I made in the very beginning is there is no such standard format. What language you write is how, what is in our mind, the reality must be conveyed. Okay. Number two, yeah, there are today, for a long time, why today? There has been a trend that your knowledge, your knowledge is displayed when you use complicated language. If you use simple language, people will comment, and many people are under a kind of pressure to use complicated words, some of which are actually jargons. You don't understand. You can go straight like this, but you're going round and round and round and using language which nobody understands. So there is no hard and fast rule. If you have learned a new word, and if you are very sure that it is not out of context, you can definitely use that. It will be nice, because basically language, I consider, is a play of words. Only thing is, never have a feeling that you have to use complex words and complex language only because we have to use them. There's absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, there is a lot of criticism that is now coming up against writing that is using complicated jargons instead of saying things in a straight manner. Today, as I told you, research is corporatized. And if you say it in very simple terms, many people will comment on you and say, oh, maybe, she doesn't know how, the language of research. So there is no hard and fast rule on anything. Don't feel bad about anything. If you think a word is context relevant, use it. And also, it shouldn't distort the meaning of the sentence. But the best thing would be to say it in straight, simple, short sentences. I like that. I don't want to say that I don't use complex words sometimes. I do use, but I think that it's not really necessary to do that just to convey. But if you know that word, if you know that it is used in sociology or any other discipline for that matter, depending on what your theme of writing is, you can use it.
Thank you.
Hello, ma'am. One more question.
Yeah.
Kindly suggest how can use research technology like NVivo for analyzing human experience and mentality into rational output?
To be very honest with you, I'm not one of those persons who says that quantitative applications in social science research must be there. Of course, there are people who say, okay, what kind of writing is this? It's only talking and saying the same thing. Say it in terms of numbers. But if it is relevant, if it is possible, and if it does not really make life more complicated for you and for those who are reading, perhaps you can use technology. See, I remember, my professor calling me and showing me a thesis. This was in the very, very beginning. Those were the days of frequency tables and percentages. We didn't have SPSS and all that stuff those days. So but then itself, she called me. This was very early 1980s. And she said, look at this thesis. It had been sent to her for evaluation. She said, do you know that this thesis has 200 tables? She said, never do this in your work, okay? Simply because you have to, show some numbers, don't do. I'm telling you, only where it is necessary. Only when you think that a table conveys something which your own writing is not able to do that, or maybe it will do it more effectively, use it. So if in qualitative methodologies and qualitative research, it's not just often possible to use quantitative methodologies. What you are saying, if it is possible, if it doesn't sound, irrelevant, because nowadays I have seen comments and I myself have written sometimes in my comments, this statistical application or this computer application looks irrelevant because it's not conveying anything. It's there just because, it has to be there. So that's again a matter of choice, and the ability to apply that relevantly to your work, you can then do it. But it's definitely not necessary that all human experience presented in a quantifiable form. But if you are able to make an effort, you can find. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. One more question. Can you suggest a method on labor migration? My work is on rickshaw pullers.
Method for what? Method for?
Work on rickshaw pullers.
Method to study them.
Yeah. Her topic is on rickshaw pullers.
today, we are in research, in social science research, we are talking a lot about what we call mixed methodology, where, because this is a group of people who don't have too much time to spare. So using the talking narrative method is perhaps, according to me, the most relevant way of collecting information. But in any research study, you have to use what is called mixed methodology. Where you see, you talk to those people, you go where they live, you travel in an auto. What I would do is, if I'm working on rickshaw pullers, I would hire an auto for at least one whole day to begin with. Go where, take, keep talking to that person, see that, his or her income source is not affected by my keeping it for one whole day. Talk and find out. And also, travel by different autos, engage them in conversation, and also go to auto rickshaw stands where people have parked their autos, talk to them. So also sometimes stand at a distance and observe, because there is a kind of a power relations in a group of auto rickshaw drivers. And you also have to go to different auto rickshaw stands in your city or wherever your work is located, because, for example, in Mysore, I know there are a couple of auto stands. There are many number of them, area wise they are there. But I know that there are certain rickshaw stands, in my city, which are considered to be power blocks, where certain things happen. So you have to identify all that, and then you start collect. See, here, a method like what we call as snowball sampling will be very effective, because you have to develop, that kind of a relationship with at least few auto drivers, uh, whom perhaps, who can spare some time for you, and through them reach out to different groups. And in sociology, well, you know that it's very important to bring certain elements into the research: the power dimension, the class caste hierarchy, the location, the kind of the socio-economic background of people who use autos. All these things have to be brought.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. And one more question. When we enter into environment-related topics like water resource management and public participation, what should be the approach we use? What should be the approach?
Public participation of what? In environment management.
Yeah, environment-related topics like water resource management and public participation.
Yeah. I think there has been a lot of research done on this topic, and there are very good, examples in India itself of how water resources have been managed in forest regions, in rural areas, in tribal communities, to handle environmental issues. So for a topic like that, I think that you have a lot of reading is required. First, read a lot, get lived in experiences of communities working in the water resource management area, and then go ahead. In many parts of the country, in every state, I'm sure there are examples of how public participation has happened in water resource management at different levels. Read them first, and then you can take off from there.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Any other questions?
Professor Sandhya,
Sir?
yeah, I think we can wind up. I think there is no more questions. And if anyone has any further question, then can contact Professor Indira directly.
Yeah, you can please share my email with them.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. I think it's time to wind up this session. And thank you all for your active participation. And looking at the feedback in the chat box, The participants rated this session as excellent, and some of the words they used to describe it include it is thoughtful, inspiring, meaningful, and motivating. Thank you, Indira ma'am, for your excellent speech. And now I invite Srimati Chandralekha CS, Research Scholar, Department of Sociology, to propose vote of thanks.
Madam, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You sing. Hello.
Good morning, respected teachers and dear friends. On behalf of Department of Sociology, IQAC and Research Students Union, I express my sincere thanks to Professor Dr. Sandhya R.S., Department of Sociology, for successfully chairing the session. I extend a really hearty vote of thanks to Professor Dr. R. Indira, eminent sociologist who needs no introduction in India as well as abroad. Department of Sociology has a very warm relation with Professor Indira. She spared time from her busiest schedule to take a wonderful, insightful, and enriching session called My Tryst with Academic Writing and Publishing. Today we had an opportunity to hear your experience and thoughts, and this will surely be going to encourage all of us in our future academic endeavors, ma'am. And I extend my sincere gratitude to most respectful Dr. Anthony Palakkal, Organizing Secretary and the Head Department of Sociology, for arranging this international webinar on the art of academic writing and publishing. I also extend my gratitude to all the participants from India and abroad. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chandralekha.
Thank you, Chandralekha. Now I hand it over to Dr. Anthony Palakkal, Organizing Secretary of this webinar.
Now it's all over today's session, and Professor Indira, once again, a big thank you to you. I know you are there for us all the time.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Man, I have had this long-standing relationship with your department, and I always talk about the academic writing, the tradition which you started in ISS.
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
Last year. Yeah.
So once again, very kind of you to spare time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm Professor Sandhya.
Indira ma'am. Indira ma'am. Good morning. How are you, ma'am?
Hi. How are you?
Yeah. So we will wind up.
Fine, ma'am. Fine.
And thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for your contribution. Okay. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Conductor of the session. Okay. So tomorrow, the last day. Excuse me. Just an announcement. Tomorrow we have the last session, the valedictory. The valedictory lecture will be delivered by Professor Murali Nair of University of California. He's going to talk more specifically on publication. Like now he has termed it differently, suitable to our times, like marketing our research outcomes. How to market outcomes. So we are going to listen to him tomorrow and the last day. And so I hope all of you will be there present, and as you have been these days. That's all. I have put some literature and PowerPoints, of 2 sessions, in the WhatsApp group. If you have not received it, those who are not in WhatsApp group can communicate with us and shall be provided. That's all. So have a nice day ahead. Okay, bye. The feedback form is there. The link is there to kindly fill in and submit as soon as possible.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you.